Hi Year 6, happy Friday! In literacy today you're going to be learning how to use colons and semicolons. So let's have a little look at what they look like. So here on the screen we have a colon and a semicolon. Do you know which one is which? So the first one is the colon. And as you can see, the colon is like two full stops, one on top of the other. And that means the second one is a semicolon. So a semicolon is like a full stop on top of a comma. Okay, and we're going to learn how to use these two pieces of punctuation in sentences today. So what we need to remember is that a colon and a semicolon can replace certain words in a sentence. Okay, so a colon can replace the word because, and a semicolon could replace the word and, or it could replace the word but. So pause the video, read this sentence, and see if you can work out whether we would use a colon or a semicolon in this sentence. So a good way to work it out would be to read the sentence with either the word because in it or and or but. So let's try because first. So he always keeps his costume at home because you never know when there might be an emergency. Yeah, that could make sense. Does it make sense to say he always keeps his costume at home and you never know when there'll be an emergency? And you never know when there might be an emergency. Or could we say he always keeps his costume at home, but you never know when there might be an emergency? So I don't think it would really make sense to put but or and in that space. But it would make sense if we said because instead. So because this, we could put the word because here, we use, which is it, a colon or a semicolon? Can you remember? It's a colon. A colon is because, and a semicolon is and or but. So we're going to put a colon in there. Okay? Let's look at this sentence now. So pause the video again, read through and see if you think it would be a colon or a semicolon that goes in there. Okay, what do you think? I'm going to read the sentence again with the different options like I did last time. So Spider-Man has lots of allies. He also has some enemies. So let's try different things. So Spider-Man has lots of allies because he also has some enemies. I don't think that makes sense. Spider-Man has lots of allies and he also has some enemies. That makes sense. Spider-Man has lots of allies, but he also has some enemies. Yeah, that makes sense. So this time, and or but would make sense in that sentence. So we'll put a semicolon in this time. Remember, the semicolon is like the full stop and the comma underneath. Okay, I want you to stop the video now and I want you to have a go at deciding whether we'd put a colon or a semicolon in each of the spaces in these sentences. When you've had a go, press play and we'll go through them together. Okay, so let's look at A. I like Captain America, blank, I prefer Superman. Now, if we put a colon here, it would read, I like Captain America because I prefer Superman. Does that make sense? No, not really. So let's try what it could be if it was a semicolon. I like Captain America, but I prefer Superman. Now that makes sense, doesn't it? So we would use a semicolon in this gap here. Working. That's really annoying. There we go. Got there in the end. Okay, let's look at the second one now. So, I think Spider-Man is cool because he has an awesome costume. Well, that would work if we use because is a colon. I think Spider-Man is cool and he has an awesome costume. That would make sense as well. I think Spider-Man is cool, but he has an awesome costume. Wouldn't quite make sense, but it would work for because, and that's a colon, or for and that's a semicolon. So actually in this sentence, you could have chosen to use either a colon or a semicolon. And in C, let's have a look at C. Wonder Woman is very popular because she is the most well-known female superhero. Yeah, that makes sense. Wonder Woman is very popular and she is the most well-known female superhero. Yeah, that makes sense. But which one kind of makes more sense? Wonder Woman is very popular because she is the most well-known female superhero. I think that's because it's a reason why, isn't it? So I think both would make sense, but I think a colon would make the most sense because that would use the word because. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at finishing a sentence where we've already got either a colon or a semicolon in there. Okay, so here we have the first part of a sentence and then a colon at the end. So we're going to read this first part of the sentence and then we're going to say the word because for the colon. Black Panther needs super strength because. What could come after that to finish the sentence off? If you got an idea, why don't you write an idea down on a piece of paper? What did you come up with? I think what I'm going to say is Black Panther needs super strength because he has to fight against his enemies. And that's kind of explaining why he needs the super strength. And it makes sense with the word because in between the two parts of the sentence. Black Panther needs super strength because he has to fight against his enemies. That makes sense. Let's have a look at this next one. So this time it's a semicolon. So it could be Hulk can defeat his enemies at short range, but, or it could be Hulk can defeat his enemies at short range and. This time I'm going to use the semicolon as the word but. So Hulk can defeat his enemies at short range, but he finds it difficult when they are further away. Okay, so that makes sense. Now just look at the two parts of the sentence, the part before the semicolon and the part after the semicolon. They both make sense, and that's really important to remember when we use a colon or a semicolon in the middle of a sentence. The part before and the part after have to make sense on their own. Today you're going to be writing about the skills and abilities of the superhero you chose to research on Monday. And we're going to try and include a colon and a semicolon in our writing. So as you can see, I've written a subheading of skills and abilities. That's so the reader knows what this paragraph is about. Okay, so as I have been doing this week, I'm going to be writing about Spider-Man. Okay, and I've just put in the margin the colon and the semicolon and what they mean to remind me to use them as I go along. Okay, so I'm going to start off by writing Spider-Man has many different skills and abilities. So that sentence just introduces the paragraph, tells the reader what they're going to be reading about. And I'm going to start with what I think is one of Spider-Man's most important skills. So I think that it's really important that he has really good balance, because he's moving between different buildings, and if he didn't have good balance, that would be really difficult to do. So I'm going to write the sentence, and it's going to start with, one of his most important skills is. So one of his most important skills is his impressive balance. And I'm going to add on why that's important. So I might write, one of his most important skills is his impressive balance because, but remember, we can use a colon instead of the word because, so I'm going to do that here. So my colon in, and then I'm going to think about what I'm going to write so that it would make sense. So one of his most important skills is his impressive balance because he has to jump between tall buildings. Okay, full stop. And I'm happy that this makes sense, and that the bit before the colon makes sense and the bit after the colon makes sense. I'm just going to tick that off to show that I have used a colon already. Okay. Next things that I'm going to write about is Spider-Man's spider sense. I'm going to say another important skill is his spider sense. Although I might not write important because I've already used that before. So I'm going to change it to another of Spider-Man's essential skills is his spider sense. Which allows him to cling to most solid surfaces. Okay, I think I'm going to include one last sentence in this paragraph about Spider-Man's skills, and I want to make sure that in this sentence I use a semicolon. In my final sentence, I'm going to write about Spider-Man's web shooters. So I'm going to start with Spider-Man also uses his web shooters to capture his enemies. And then I'm going to use a semicolon there as the word but. So Spider-Man also uses his web shooters to capture his enemies, but he must be careful not to get caught using them. Full stop at the end. Okay, so I've now used a colon as well, so I'm going to tick that off in the margin, and I'm going to read through the paragraph again to check that it makes sense. So, Spider-Man has many different skills and abilities. One of his most important skills is his impressive balance. He has to jump between tall buildings. Another of Spider-Man's essential skills is his spider sense, which allows him to cling to most solid surfaces. Spider-Man also uses his web shooters to capture his enemies. He must be careful not to get caught using them. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that now, because I've written about his skills and abilities, and I've used a colon and a semicolon, and it all makes sense. So you're now going to go and write your own paragraphs about your superheroes, about their skills and abilities, and you've got to try and use a colon and a semicolon in your paragraph. Make sure you send your work to your teacher as well.